Dr. Just in his presentation made a comment, and that was that the Spirit declares war on Satan. And you may have noticed the icon of St. Michael in Zion's narthex. We observe the Michaelmas skip. We actually celebrate Michaelmas. And I was surprised to hear that it's the Spirit rather than St. Michael, which is, of course, Christ, with the spear slaying the dragon. So, Dr. Just, maybe you could tell me a little bit about how it is that the Spirit is involved in that.
Yeah, thank you. Let me clarify that a little bit. I was talking about Galatians, and one of the interesting things about Galatians is, as you know, Paul starts with the Father and the Son in his opening, words in the first 4 verses, but he waits until chapter 3 to actually have his first reference to the Spirit, and he does it this way: did you receive the Spirit by works of the law or by the hearing of faith? And then he says, having begun in the Spirit, you're now perfected in the flesh. And he says, who supplies the Spirit to works miracles among you, etc. And Paul has a purpose here. I think actually in this passage he's talking about, and this isn't my idea, but I wholeheartedly embrace it, is that he's talking about two different worship liturgies, 2 different liturgies. A liturgy that is by the Spirit, by the pneuma, and one by works of the law. His opponents do works of the law liturgies. His are, obviously the Spirit of Christ. But the reference that I did there from, God sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father, obviously reference to baptism. When you come up out of the font, what is it that you first say? And I think Paul is saying, you now know who your Father is, so you say, Abba, Father. But to answer your question, it's in chapter 5 of Galatians, between the flesh and the Spirit. And I think the better way of putting it than I did is that the Spirit declares war on the flesh, which of course is not unrelated to Satan.
Yeah.
Because the flesh has us, and it's the Spirit who invades. The Spirit who actually says, okay, let's engage here, because Christ has come, and it's the Spirit of Christ. It's the Spirit of Christ in our baptisms. And so we basically are the ones who are declaring war against Satan, not the other way around, because that's part of that whole apocalyptic theology. Now that Christ has come with his Spirit, Satan's on alert. He's this, the other text for St. Michael's, as some of you know, is Luke 10. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a wonderful text. That's after the sending of the 70. And I think, the word of the testimony of the 70 is what causes Satan to fall like lightning, and the miracles, which I think are a foretaste of the sacrament. So there's a sense there that word and sacrament ministry is what is defeating Satan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The second quick question, although this won't be quick, is Dr. Justin mentioned the dialogue regarding the precise moment of consecration as being something that the Western Church is overly concerned with. Now, that was not his quote. He was quoting an author, but I just wondered if he would make a couple of comments on this question.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I think, that's always been a difficult question, hasn't it? And again, I remember taking a course on Eastern Orthodoxy at Yale Divinity School. And I was struck by the comment that the professor made there when he said that the real presence starts for the Eastern Church when your alarm clock goes off in the morning and you decide to go to church. That it's a wider sense of where, Christ is present. Now, he was obviously overstating that. But one of the things I think you learn when you study between the East and the West is the East, the presence of Christ is throughout. They don't pinpoint it. At least that's my understanding. There's a sense where really from the beginning to the end, Christ is present, and he certainly is present in a special way at that moment of consecration, or in the moment of the verba. Lutherans have, I mean, you probably know this better than I, because I'm not an expert on this, but I mean, Lutherans have always been careful not to pinpoint the moment of consecration. And yet take out the verba, and everybody will scream because I mean, the verba is certainly important there. So, I mean, and how can we not be consecrationists in a way, right? And I mean, and I don't have any trouble with that. I think that's really true. I'm also a consecrationist in the sermon. When you preach, Christ is present there. He's in your ears, I mean, there's a bodily presence of Christ there. So in a way, I mean, I think we just, where the word is, there is Christ. And he is certainly there when we speak those words over the bread and wine. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I think the big danger is to be a receptionist. That's obviously the problem. And I'm sure many of you know this probably better than I, but I come across it, how many people in our church are receptionists. Crazy. I mean, it's amazing. And I think that's a real danger because, I mean, whether you like it or not, I mean, the word is everything in preaching, in the sacrament. That's the main thing. And that's all you're saying is it's the enfleshed presence of Christ there speaking to us in his word. So that's how I'd answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questions from the august congregation?
Uh-oh. Right
Oh,
here.
Father
Right,
Zaley,
Father
please.
Zaley.
Okay.
Mike?
I can take it. I was very much struck with the theme of heaven and earth connecting. And being from the Michigan district, and we're so into church growth, I immediately thought of the greatest event of church growth this side of Pentecost, when the emissaries of Vladimir, the Prince of Kiev, went searching for a national religion. And they visited the Muslims, and they visited the Jews, and they visited Rome. But at Constantinople, they witnessed the full Byzantine liturgy. And they said those very words. We thought we couldn't tell if we were on heaven or on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what convinced a whole race of people, a whole class of cultures to embrace Christianity, to embrace Christ. Would you say a few words about this connection of heaven and earth and how we can invite others into that experience?
Please.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great quote. I mean, it's true. And I think it shows you how important what we do and where we do it is crucial to communicating that. From the Jensen quote that I gave, it doesn't matter if it's Dura Aeropus, which is a house church in East Syria, or, Hagia Sophia, Christ is present there. But Christians and Jews, I would say, were the same, is they want to reflect in their space the fact that this is a heavenly moment. As you're talking, I'm trying to think of the magnificent church in France. This is what's happening to me in old age. I lose, not Notre Dame. It's what's that? Chartres Cathedral. Yeah. When they built that, they asked them, why are you? I mean, the same questions people ask today. Why are you spending all this money on this beautiful church? Why don't you give it to the poor? And they said, well, we want to have a lovely place when the Lord returns so that he can come. And I thought, what a wonderful thought that is, and I thought of that this morning. I mean, I haven't been in Zion in a long time. You have a magnificent space, and the whole, I mean, how can you not be struck that something significant is happening here? And, during the worship wars, I would always tell people, the problem is people come into our worship and it doesn't look like anything else, that they recognize during the week. There's nothing different here. There's nothing special. There's no significant artworks, reverence. There's no movement that it distinguishes itself. And I, again, this morning I said, I mean, if people came in here, they would have to say, oh, these people believe that something really miraculous is happening in this space. And I think when people come into our churches, they need to be struck by the fact that we do believe that, the creator and redeemer of the cosmos is here, and that it's reflected in what we say, what we do, the artwork, the way the reverence that we have. I mean, just as an example today, and I don't want to go too far with this, but it's shocking how people come to church today. I mean, I just wish people, my wife, I think in her lifetime has worn pants to church maybe 3 times. I mean, she's started that way. But I mean, if you're going to meet the King of England, you don't wear shorts and sandals.
Yes.
I mean, maybe if you're Jesus, you could get away with it. But you know what I mean? It just this is something wrong there. The example you gave is one that I think of a lot, because they clearly recognize something significant,
Yeah.
and they wanted this.
Yeah.
And this is something that, and the difference between, I visited a lot of mosques in my travels, and I don't know if you know this, I didn't, I do now, is that they're built to proclaim the real absence of God. I mean, that's how they are. God's not here. That is why they have those, the artwork that they have. It proclaims a real absence, and that's intentional. Whereas our churches do not do that. I mean, they proclaim that there is a presence here, and that it's a bodily presence, and it's fleshly, and it's something that we need to commune with. So I could go on, but that's enough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions from the floor? Father Roland.
Your initial reflection, I guess, on the worship wars or whatever, I'm just wondering, are they really over? We, in the Missouri Synod, seem about halfway destined to become the ELCA. We're using their services. I've been familiar, at least directly, with probably 20 congregations up in the thumb of Michigan here, 2 different circuits that I was in. I'm the only one that does what is now downgraded to Divine Service 3, the traditional Christian service for generations, eons, centuries.
Father Roland is asking Dr. Just, please, to revisit the question of worship wars, and are we really over worship wars? And what he sees is that it's not over. Is that
I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, I think what I would say is, and I've thought about this. I think we have a truce. I think we're sort of in a time where we're not fighting anymore. I think they won, and I think we won. I think it's both. And I think most of you would probably say, oh, I think they won. But just think about, I mean, I'm starting my 42nd year at the seminary, and think of the world that I have witnessed in 42 years liturgically. I mean, more people know and care about the liturgy and celebrate the liturgy with reverence and with a sense of this presence than they ever did 42 years ago. More people are having every Sunday Eucharist than they ever had before. I mean, on many ways, we certainly have won on the, how would you say it, on the high ground in terms of books written, papers written, conferences that reflect this. I mean, I can't tell you how things have changed in those years. I mean, it's unbelievable. When I used to teach Lutheran worship back in the old days, students would come to class and be shocked that we believed in the real presence and what that meant. They couldn't believe that. They were Lutherans. I haven't taught Lutheran worship in a while, but the last few times I taught it, many of those students knew more about the liturgy than I did. And so I'm talking to the choir there. These guys are very well rehearsed in this. So on many levels, I thank God how great we came out of the worship wars. I really, really believe that. And I think in many ways it's only going to get better. I think I mean, if you look at the kind of the trends in culture, people are wanting more ritual. They're moving towards churches that have this sense of reverence. I think they're tired of that stuff. It's boomer stuff, guys. It's my generation. It really is. And we're dying, we're getting tired.
Peterson, I'll get it out, gave us on the atheism of our clergy. And I just happened to be reading the Lutheran Study Bible, again, of course, and in the book of Exodus. I'm looking at the miracles, the plagues, and the explanation of those is all done in a worldly fashion. They actually contradict God. That the Red Sea did not turn to blood. It was somehow or other changed into a red substance of some kind, and they do that with all of them. So what kind of theologians do we have that would give that impression to people? And is that something that's affecting our liturgy too, or we just, I don't know, just become kind of mushy about the whole thing, and whatever goes is okay?
I mean, yeah, what you're talking about is how people who were Christians, especially back when I was growing up, were trying to explain the miracles away. And the fact of the matter is, you just got to embrace them, and they are so important to the ministry of Jesus. And this is what really kind of turned me from being an atheist about these things and really embracing them, is when I began to realize, and I'd love to just kind of reflect a little bit about what you said, David, about vivid versus what was that? Visible, yeah, right. Because, when I went to seminary, miracles testified that Jesus is Son of God. Okay, that's great. I mean, it's true. You can't deny that. But it's so much more than that. It's inaugurated eschatology. It's that the Creator has come to his creation in the flesh, and he touches people's flesh, and he speaks, and stuff happens. He is the Creator reversing, the sicknesses and the casting out demons and raising the dead. They testify that he's there in the flesh doing the work of the new creation. That is so crucial. And that's why sacraments are the new miracles, because they testify to the presence of Christ, the Creator, in his creation, making all things new through baptism, through sacraments. I mean, so miracles are absolutely crucial, very, very important. I think the harder thing for people are angels and demons, because of a lot of it is what culture does. Notice culture is obsessed with angels and demons. I mean, I just found out about this new children's thing that our kids are seeing. Have you heard about this? I can't even tell you what it is. But, my wife's all up in arms. Should we tell our grandchildren about this? But it's all, I mean, there are these demon present. Yeah, I forget the name of it. I just found out like a day or two ago. And so, I mean, there is a fascinating, people know that there's, I love that notion of that, like, there's a veil. You said it today, that the air, that the angels and demons are there. I did a children's sermon, I have to say, with children about this. And they had no trouble with it. I said, imagine while we're standing here, there's a cloud above our head. Okay. You can't see through the cloud, but there are angels there that are flying around here in this service, and they're going, yeah. I mean, they're totally into it. I mean, they absolutely get it. And I mean, I do think if you try to explain, to go back to your question, explain them naturally, yeah, give it a shot, but that's not the point. It's not the point. And you know who I recommend to you? I just listened to a podcast by him. I'm very high on him. Ross Douthat, do you know him? New York Times, conservative, Catholic. He just did it's an old one, but Barry Weiss, who started the Free Press, she was a New York Times correspondent. She was kicked out, and she has a podcast called Honesty, and he just wrote a book on faith. And I highly recommend you. I haven't read the book, but listen to that podcast, because he really, I mean, he had the best explanation of miracles, not unlike what I just did. But I mean, he goes, I mean, if the God can create the universe, he can do miracles. If he could become incarnate, he could do miracles. If he could rise from the dead, he could do miracles. This shouldn't be very hard, you know. And it is a very reasonable guy. I find him to be very, very helpful in this day and age, where you have a kind of an onslaught of things against us. But he did say in that podcast that the New York Times is not as hostile as they used to be when he came on 15 years ago. They actually, there's a sense there, and things are, I think there's a shift. I'll tell you, this Charlie Kirk, he's a game changer, everybody. He is a game changer. This could be the moment we've been waiting for. I totally believe that. And I did not know this guy at all. I mean, I knew who he was, but my wife follows him. And when she came in and told me, she was like just weeping uncontrollably. And he has affected a lot of people that way. And I think, I mean, I think they unleashed a monster, frankly. And I think we have to find a way to jump on its back. There's something there that we need to be in conversation with this crowd.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Father Berg, did you want to know? Okay. We have time for one more question. We'll start the panel. So if there are extra questions, hang on to them. We'll do it with the whole panel. One more,
Can I say one thing?
please.
Okay. One thing I didn't bring up, and somebody mentioned to it, Bishop Steckholz, my topic has and I'm sure you know this, has an enormous pastoral care dimension to it. And that is that I think one of the things I found during the worship wars, when I talked about this with laity, they would come up to me afterwards and they would be angry. And they weren't angry at me. They were angry at their pastors who never told them this, that they had been going to the Eucharist for all these years and they did not understand the union of heaven and earth and the communion they had in Christ with their loved ones. And this was something that they said this would have been an enormous comfort to us. This was an incredibly pastoral thing for my wife and I, because, and I tell this story occasionally because it certainly illustrates it. Her sister-in-law was her sister, I should say, my sister-in-law, her sister was raped and murdered in 1980 in Dallas, Texas, by a man who wanted to be the next Charles Manson, who claimed to be possessed by Satan, basically. And it was the most horrific kind of thing you could possibly imagine. And I did not have this sense of angels and archangels and all the company of heaven, but I learned it in trying to minister to her and her parents and even to myself. And her name was Barbara. I think of Barbara at every Eucharist because that's how I grieve over Barbara. And I think of those who died in the faith the week before at every Eucharist, that they're singing with the angels and archangels and all the company of heaven while we're singing here below. There's a union there. When you tell people this, I think it's some of the greatest pastoral care after a death that you can give them. My wife's grandmother, old St. Paul's, Fort Wayne gal, grew up in Wisconsin. She was a 4 times a year, go to communion because that's what they were taught. And she noticed that my wife and I, after Barbara's death, and she probably should have noticed it beforehand, but we went to the Eucharist every Sunday, every time it was celebrated. And she, we were having dinner together, and she said, in my days, when people did what you do, that was considered showy, that was kind of an act of your piety more than ever. And I said, Grandma, have I never told you about the angels and archangels and the whole company of heaven? And she goes, no, what do you? So I gave her the whole blick. I call it the blick. That's what we call it. I gave her the blick on this. And she knew it. She understood it. I mean, she took it in. She did, and she was kind of, for her, she was a tough old lady. She was kind of gobsmacked by this. Well, we noticed that she's going to the Eucharist now every time it's being celebrated, because she recognized, because she had never grieved over her granddaughter, and she found this to be a wonderful grieving. Well, just a corollary to that story, we were having lunch after I had preached in a church where they had 2 services and the sacrament twice, and so I received in the first service and the second service. And she asked me that. She said, "Did you receive twice today?" And I said, "Well, Grandma, that's what you do when you're, you know." And she looked at me with a twinkle in her eye and she said, "Now that's really showy." Yeah, you're welcome.
We're going to segue into our panel. Father Peterson is with us. You want to join us up front?
So how has Gottesdienst changed over the years? For good or for him?
I mean,
Besides you bring me on. Just the topics of conversations that we engage in and kind of what you see our mission is. And what role do we play? If there's a truce, what's the point? Are we the muckrakers now? Do we start it up again? Are we the defenestration of Prague?
When I was in my second year of a parish that shall not be named, I worked with a parent in our school in catechism, and he joined the congregation, and he went in the Sunday after his congregation, and he was confronted by an usher who wanted to know if he was for the pastor or against him. I never saw him come to church again. That's what it means to be in a war. You are invited to take up sides. In that sense, the worship wars are over. Praise be to God. It means that while the other side is not converted, they have been humbled. And I'll speak for my Michigan district. We have been gung-ho on church growth for the last 20 years, and every year we lose more and more people. We've fallen behind the Catholic Church in terms of percentage of losses and all that. It's beginning to dawn on some of my brothers in the ministry that maybe this church growth ideology is not all it's cracked up to be. And they, in their despair and their disappointment, are ready to hear the message I heard when I was a young pastor in New Jersey district. And Dr. Just came with his presentation. And during a difficult time in my ministry, Dr. Just, your words, God's words through you, helped me to recover the joy of being in God's presence, to recognize that that's sufficient, even if my church isn't growing. And thanks to your work, you are a major reason why, and other brothers like you, why the worship wars have subsided into a, at times, friendly truce. We are open to listening. We are open to find alternatives to the failed strategies that promise growing churches and prosperity. And that is to meet with God in the divine service and let God do the work of converting souls rather than our programs or whatever. As to Gottesdienst's role in this, I think you have a very important role. I'm a subscriber, but not otherwise a member of Gottesdienst. And that appeal to common sense, that appeal to Christian tradition, that fraternal appeal that God deserves the best that we can offer, I think that will find willing hearts. And maybe I should give a few gift subscriptions out to some of my people in Michigan. But I think that's the role that Gottesdienst has. Continue to speak to the hearts of people, to that they may affirm the faith once commended to the saints.
Yeah, we pass it to Father Peterson.
Yeah, this is I mean, a pretty fascinating topic, I think, actually. I don't want to get too far askew because there's lots that could be said. I was to take it in a slightly different direction. I want to respond to some of what Dr. Just was saying, who is also, of course, like for all of us, such an important influence. Um, I was sort of, this is sort of meta data sort of stuff. But, when you were talking about eschatology, the reason it's so comforting, this is actually comfort that is derived from doctrine.
Right. Yes.
Right. So I think, I don't know if this is exactly the Gottesdienst role, but I think what we actually need to do is we actually need to think a little bit about the act of teaching and teaching in a kind of doctrinal way. So we had church growth stuff, which is kind of died out from my church growth stuff was basically based on demographics.
Yeah.
It was successful in suburbs where white Lutherans were moving. It never worked in inner city Detroit.
Right.
So it's kind of just the demographics are gone. It doesn't work anymore. And I think people have woken up to that, and God be praised. The other kind of, I think, issue that the Missouri Synod's had, I know I've been beating this drum a long time, but it's kind of antinomianism. And that's a complicated thing, but I think a kind of minimalistic approach to the faith. And I think a kind of doctrinal rigor and a knowledgeable preaching of these things is what really brings comfort and what endures and what draws people. So I'll take a little bit of I'd love to hear your response to this, but kind of a little, not a critique exactly, but so you have your outline of the worship service, and I don't know if it was yours or not, and you had the bridge or the hinge being the sermon, and the high point on the word being the gospel, and the high point on the sacrament being the verbo. I'd like to modify that document, and I would make the high point kind of simultaneous of the gospel and preaching.
Yeah.
Because the preaching is the actual application. And if it isn't received, it's kind of worthless, right? I mean, not worthless maybe, but we don't believe in ex operata. And then, of course, then I want to do, and I'm not a receptionist at all. I'm totally a consecrationist, but, right, we believe it's for people to eat and drink. If they don't receive this sacrament, right, it doesn't really do them any good. And so, anyway, so I don't know what any of that meant, or you just talk. We just like listening to you talk.
I know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you, sir. Yeah, I agree with you, sir. It's the gospel continued. It's it's a high point, but because of its connection with the gospel. But some of you may not know this, but when I went to the seminary, if you were liturgical, if you were liberal,
Yeah.
okay, you were high church liberals. Is that you wore a collar. I mean, liturgical people were not at all associated with the confessional movement. We talk about the worship wars, but they really are confessional doctrine wars. And I think that the amazing thing about, the liturgy and people who are, like you folks at Gottesdienst that are, engaged in really bringing the beauties of this to the church. You're all also confessional conservative Lutherans. I mean, that was not the case. It was not the case. So I think this is a huge change. And I think the worship wars are really they're theological wars, frankly. I mean, I've been at the seminary now 42 years, and we have been attacked by the church for our theology the whole time I've been there.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you stories, like my wife always says, show them your scars, I mean, the first 10 years I was there, it was horrific. And it even, we've had moments and it's still happening. I think the church is not necessarily simply against the liturgy. They're against good Lutheran confessional dead orthodoxy. I mean, that's what they're against. And that's why they don't want our students. That's why they don't want Fort Wayne guys in their parishes. So it's a bigger issue than that. I mean, it's bigger than just the liturgy itself. And it's interesting to me how the liturgy has become a kind of a reflection of a theological point of view. And this is who we are. So, I mean, I appreciate you not thinking it's a truce, but we just don't fight the way we used to. I mean, when I used to go out, I can't tell you how I mean, it was horrible. I mean, we'd get attacked, and there'd be this them and us, and it was all apologetic arguments. I mean, I was trying to address all these things, and I do tell the story because it's true. My 3-year-old son, he said to me once when I was going on another one of these weekends, and he said, "Where are you going?" I go, "Well, I'm going to defend the liturgy." and and I looked at him and I said, that's not right. The liturgy doesn't need defense. The liturgy is the liturgy. I mean, and it was then that I began to change the way I talked about it. Instead of being defensive, apologetic, I went on the offensive. Here are the treasures. Here are the gifts. I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is why I really started to focus on inaugurated eschatology. If you can't be totally gobsmacked by the fact that the creator and redeemer of the universe is here with his gifts, his flesh, if that doesn't, then I can't argue anymore. I mean, God bless you, but I hope you find it in those silly little praise songs you're doing. And remember, the worship wars were to move away from a particular kind of theology, a particular kind of Lutheranism, to a evangelicalism. That's remember evangelical style Lutheran worship.
Right.
I debated him 3 or 4 times,
Oh.
and let me tell you, I mean, that was I'm being recorded, so I'll just say that was quite a challenge. But I mean, those are the things we were facing in this bifurcation between substance and style. I do remember saying to him, "I'm going to write a book called, Roman Catholic style Lutheran substance," and he went crazy. There's a larger issue. I mean, I could spend the next hour telling you war stories about the worship wars, but I do think, to a sense, I haven't gone out and done that in a long time. Maybe others are doing that, but that has kind of subsided.
Right.
It really has.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I don't think the wars are there. But I love what you guys are doing. We've got to keep, I mean, we're going to win by winning the argument. And I think David's right. It is a dogmatic argument at the end of the day. We got to get the word out. And I mean, that's what I've spent my whole life doing. One more thing though. I think one of the things we have to do, and this is why there was, the wars, church growth was about church growth. It was about evangelism.
Yeah.
Okay. And I always used to say it's a noble thing. We're all for that, right? I do think we need to be more missiologically.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I went into international mission. Not just because I spoke Spanish, but I thought, as a liturgical guy, being a missiological guy is actually kind of a unique thing. I mean, I say this with all due humility, but I mean, who would have ever expected during the worship wars that Concordia University Irvine would give me the Great Commission Award? Okay. I mean, that's thing in the world. But I do think that's one of the things, as liturgical confessional guys, we should find a way to really, and I think we're trying to do that at our center, really are. And I think that would, I mean, that you're talking about taking the fangs out of the devil. That'll do it. Very good.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes for a few extra questions. At 2:15, we're going to take a break. So is there a question from the congregation? If there isn't, I'm going to go. Father Basler.
Recently at a discussion group, we were talking about the apology to the Augsburg Confession on tradition and rights in the church. And I think it's instructive that it says the Roman Catholics insist on their liturgy because they make it a matter of conscience. If you don't follow the prescribed liturgy, it puts your salvation in danger. And Lutherans also, in that statement, extolled the idea of unity in worship between congregations. But the answer, the reason they gave, was that it is for good order and tranquility in the church. And what we see today in the bifurcation of church growth versus whatever you want to call traditional worship is a condition in which we will always never have tranquility, because as we're looking for a church, we got to pick a certain brand of church, and we'll never have good order because our churches should be interchangeable as far as membership and the allegiance that comes to the congregations. And it's suggestive of what St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, I am of Apollos, and I am of Paul, and I am of Cephas. And as they were extolling each of them and following them, where's Jesus? We're all followers of Jesus. And it seems to me that doctrinally, what we have here is there's a confusion of what the relationship between doctrine and life is. You're worried about doctrine, I'm worried about life. We have to have Christians that live the right life, do the right kinds of worshiping, and that sort of thing. But the doctrine is not just to be preached and preserved, but it's to be taught and inculcated into the hearts of believers so that they are changed by the doctrine, so that they have the mind of Christ, so they no longer think the way the world and the devil thinks, but now think the way that Jesus thinks and the mind of God. And St. Paul says of his believers, you are our epistles, written not on papers, but in your heart and in love. And again, whenever we try to make something of the letter, it is what you do. But the Spirit of God is the Spirit of love. All of this is because God loves us and does not want us to remain sinners and lost to him, but wants us completely reclaimed unto him. And that's why our life must be a life of repentance and why we must have pure doctrine, because it tells us what we need to repent of and what God is making us into in Christ. So everything in Scripture should take place in us. It's not just history. Cain and Abel are here. Cain wants to slay Abel, and Abel cries out to the Lord for mercy for himself and for his brother. And so doctrine must be inculcated into people, and we should not permit anything but that pure doctrine to be given. Otherwise, the devil will have that part of them.
Okay, Father, thank you very much. Anybody want to mount a response? I mean, I'm obviously just saying amen.
Yeah.
And thanks to Father Basley for leading the confessional study group to which he referred that's going through the apology. Father Zyla, who is also a member of our group.
Yeah. The insistence on liturgy is a little bit like my mother insisting that I eat my dinner. I could have eaten another dinner and gotten the nourishment. I could have eaten what I wanted, and I would have missed half that nourishment and gotten a whole lot more fat and sugar. I think that's what liturgy or worship is for us. We do not affirm that everyone has to, that we must be uniform in all rites and such. But we affirm the liturgy because it is a healthy formula. I'm myself am trying to work through. It seems to me that if you take the word and sacrament seriously, you are going to have liturgy. It might be as different from our hymnal as the Eastern Orthodox is from Catholic, but it will still be word centered, the presence of God, the meeting of heaven and earth, the authority of the word, the reality of the sacrament, so on and so forth. And I think we would be comfortable with that. But to throw out these elements and make something else more important is where we subvert that. In some church growth settings, God is not the most important in the room. The most important in the room is the visitor. And so we celebrate the visitor. We give him all the attention. And God gets comparatively little. That's what strikes us when we go to a liturgical church. God is given the preeminence. And we can talk to one another in the coffee hour afterwards, but that's why Zion has the custom, the laudable custom of no conversation in the sanctuary, and other such things. So I think there is something essential in the liturgy, the word and sacrament. We don't need to make that a law so that it's identical. But on the other hand, as Father Baisley has mentioned, it's for good order. I see the scheme of the devil in the fact that at the same time that McDonald's was building its empire on reproducible experience, Missouri Synod at the same time abandoned its historic commitment to the greatest possible uniformity in worship.
You know what? I want to disagree.
Okay.
You're making me nervous here. Maybe Baisley's making me nervous too. This feels to me a little bit like the way that the Lutheran conversation always kind of devolves into adiaphora. And I'm not accusing either of you of this exactly, but I'm not at all. But at the same time, it's like the difference between the Holy Scriptures and the confessions. We do need to make this distinction, absolutely, right? Between what is actually authoritative and what is the source. But we are not being legalists when we insist upon the catechism, right? It's not a man-made rule to say you've got to believe in the creed, even though it's not in the Bible in exactly these words. And I think that there's a temptation for us to kind of fall back into this sort of freedom, we don't need uniform ceremonies and so forth, that kind of denigrate the liturgy into something less than it actually is. Now, having said that, I don't know exactly what it is, and I don't know what the exact parameters of it are, but I'm uncomfortable with just dismissing it. Neither of you said adiaphora and so forth, but we got to have some actual substance, and it seems to me at the bare minimum, we ought to be able to say without shame, we're going to be Lutheran. That there is a Lutheran liturgy that is identifiable, right? And it's not legalism to insist upon it for Lutherans. I don't know if that's too much.
Well, basically,
No, I agree with what you said too. But the thing that I want to point out in it is that the doctrine of Christian freedom is not freedom to do anything. And it is freedom to express love. Yeah. And again, if you're going to go off the liturgy, what do you love? I love the church's past. I love what Christ has done in every generation, and I value those things. That's one of the reasons I love the liturgy that we have. Now, what do you love? Well, I love change.
thank you. I think that was well heard. Yeah. Thank you very much. Father, please. We have about 3 minutes.
I was hoping Dr. Johnson or whoever else could point us in a direction regarding the evangelistic task that we have ahead of us. I fully agree that we see the reality of this worship war truce in that when Lutherans from a different flavor of the Missouri Synod, a different type of parish, show up at our churches, and they don't stick around when they recognize that this isn't what they want, they just go to a different denomination church that looks like their home parish. And I think we've all had anecdotes to this end. And so where does our evangelistic task begin? Do we try to convert our brothers in the office? Do we try to plant new faithful confessional liturgical parishes? Do we try to take over our districts? I mean, obviously the answer is all of the above, but what do you think would be a place to start?
To start with, we do the liturgy well, we sing it well, and we get the congregation to do it, we get the congregation to love it, great preaching, and everybody to kind of be friendly and love each other, and welcome the stranger. I mean, I think hospitality is huge, especially in this day and age. It's huge. People being welcome, and you'd be surprised how far that goes. People just talking to people. I mean, I think in this day and age, I think we've just been given an opportunity. Let's go. Let's do it. And I think the Missouri Synod I'm Missouri Synod because it's the best act in town. There's nothing better than it. Yeah. And I know that we have our problems. I mean, I know we have our warts, but you look around, we've got everything we need to go on the offensive with the gospel, and I think we should. So, I mean, hospitality, though, I think it's huge. Inviting people. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You got about a minute and a half go.
I just have a comment on the worship wars. I don't think it's at the truce right now. I think it's more of a forced stalemate because from my experience, especially being at a very liberal university at Grand Valley, the whole worship wars is a different battle than it was like 40 years ago. Right now it's more people more concerned about the style of the service, whether it's contemporary, blended, or traditional. It's more concerning about where the liturgy is good, and there's especially more emphasis on where the sermons and the preaching is good. And so I don't think the war is necessarily over. I think it's just become a different fight overall.
All right, thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I think that's maybe what I was trying to say. You said it better than I did. I mean, by truce, I kind of mean that. I mean, it's not over. We're still on two sides, but we're at a stalemate. And I think you're right. The nature of the war might be a little different, but some of those things are the same. So, yeah, but thank you.
Good. Thank you to the panel and thank you to the congregation.
Make $1 billion. But you know what? Let me just say this, and I kind of already sort of answered it. I think to start with, we do the liturgy well, we sing it well, and we get the congregation to do it. We get the congregation to love it. Great preaching, and everybody to kind of be friendly and love each other, and welcome the stranger. I mean, I think hospitality is huge, especially in this day and age. It's huge. People being welcome, and you'd be surprised how far that goes. People just talking to people. I mean, for example, I probably shouldn't say this. There were people in front this morning on the left who didn't go to the sacrament, and I should have gone and talked to them. I don't know why they're.
I just have a comment on the worship wars. I don't think it's at the truce right now. I think it's more of a forced stalemate because from my experience, especially being at a very liberal university at Grand Valley, the whole worship wars is a different battle than it was like 40 years ago. Right now it's more people more concerned about the style of the service, whether it's contemporary, blended, or traditional. It's more concerning about where the liturgy is good, and there's especially more emphasis on where the sermons and the preaching is good. And so I don't think the war is necessarily over. I think it's just become a different fight overall.
All right, thank you, Kim.
I think that's maybe what I was trying to say. You said it better than I did. I mean, by truce, I kind of mean that. I mean, it's not over. We're still on two sides, but we're at a stalemate. And I think you're right. The nature of the war might be a little different, but some of those things are the same. So, yeah, but thank you.
Good. Thank you to the panel and thank you to the congregation. All right. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I think that's maybe what I was trying to say. You said it better than I did. I mean, by a truce, I kind of mean that. I mean, it's not over. We're still
Yeah.
on two sides, but we're at a stalemate. And I think you're right. The nature of the war might be a little different, but some of those